Hello and welcome. And big surprise today. We welcome Coach Serrano back. Coach, welcome back to the Coach's Corner. It's been a lonely existence without you, but I know you've in a warmer climate, and you've been to even warmer climates. We're going to talk about that today, but I want to first and foremost welcome you back, Skip.
Walter, it's great to be back. I'm sorry I've missed so much time. Obviously, I have other commitments. Follow you, continue to follow you, all the great things you continue to do for all these families, all these student athletes, and it's good to be back. And I hope to start getting back on more to share the word with people out there in the baseball world.
You know, one of the things that Coach Serrano and I believe very strongly about is those 4 years, 5 years within the college experience. We talk about it with all of the college coaches. You know, it's more than baseball. There's a bigger message. There's a bigger kind of direction and focal point. Yes, we talk about it through the lens of baseball, but really at the end of the day, it's a collective balance, culture, social, academics. And today we're going to talk about a topic with regard to part of the collective college experience is to understand your purpose, the things that are beyond school, beyond the game. And being a college student athlete, I know when my son attended Vanderbilt, they took a trip to Cuba. And a lot of times teams will take trips and they're mission trips. And today we're going to be joined, Coach and I are joined by Jonathan Henschel of Go Ministries, which is located or headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. But Jonathan happens to be in the Dominican Republic. And Jonathan, thank you for joining Coach and I today to discuss the topic of Go Ministries.
Great to meet you guys. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we're doing down here in Santiago.
So, Coach, you know, a lot of teams will take trips. They take trips to be able to help different countries with regard to teaching the sport, teaching the game. Some take it as a team bonding. You know, when they take those trips, it's a team bonding. You've done both, and I would love for you to share your experience as head coach of Johnson University in Knoxville, Tennessee, a little bit about how this trip came about through Go Ministries, as well as its intended purpose, as well as we'll get into the outcome. But what was the purpose of the trip taking the team to the Dominican?
Well, first of all, Walter, I really appreciate you having Jonathan and I on to kind of share this experience for not only families to hear about the impact that college, your 4 years can have on you, but for other coaches that know me, that trust me, that this is a wonderful experience for you to do for your team. And I'll be honest with you, Walter, and Jonathan's going to hear this for the first time. You know, we had originally talked about this trip last May. I didn't feel the program was ready to do that. We then talked about doing it in November. There was going to be too much school time missed, and I didn't feel that was appropriate to do for our student athletes to give them the best course of action to finishing strong. And selfishly, I set it up in January. And I know Jonathan and the rest of the Go Ministries really had to scramble because that really wasn't the perfect time to come. But selfishly, I set it up in January because we were using that as a spring training site because of the weather here in East Tennessee. And I knew we were going to be guaranteed at least 75 degrees. It was 80, 85 every day out there, no rain. And it changed my life, Walter, and it changed the 34 lives that were on the trip with us. We were fortunate to be able to take 35 of our team staff and players. We had four other people along with us. And I can honestly say I came back a different person. And I can honestly say I'm very proud that I was part of something that changed the lives of 34 other people, too. Um, the experience is something I can't echo loud enough that every coach out there, if the finances are in place, is something that you need to do for your team. I shared with our team on the Saturday night before we left Sunday on our journey back to Knoxville that no matter what we do on the field this year, this team won the championship this year. And it was by how our guys soaked in the environment, what they gave back to the community, how they embraced all the people of Santiago and the surroundings community of the Dominican Republic, and the impact we had on those people, but more importantly, when we got on that plane, and to this day, I still hear the stories being told, the impact was probably stronger that they had on us. on what we saw on a daily basis. And Jonathan wasn't there that Saturday night. I mean, those guys work extremely hard and they kind of go off and on. Kyle and Jonathan were kind of our two main guides. And Kyle closed out on Saturday night the debriefing that we had with our team. And each player was supposed to say one word, how it impacted them, and then the why. And that was as powerful, Walter, of anything I've ever sat through, of the words that were being used by our players, of how this trip impacted them. And I kind of just sat back as the elder statesman of the group and was just so proud that I was able to be part of putting this together with the help of Jonathan and Kyle and the ministries and a very good friend of mine, Jason Kennedy. And I don't want his name to go unnoticed. Jason has been a big supporter of Johnson Baseball. He's been a big supporter of myself. He's been a big supporter of Go Ministries. And he basically is the one that helped us put this all together and get us connected with Jonathan and the fine group at Go Ministries.
Jonathan, I would love for you to be able to share. I mean, I know that you're not from the Dominican, and I know that this is something that you feel tremendously passionate about. You live it 24/7, 365. So how did you get involved with Go Ministries, and talk a little bit about what your focal point is there in the Dominican?
Yeah, so I went to a small Christian college in Bourbonnais, Illinois called Olivet Nazarene University, and I pitched for 4 years. I played baseball, and then I was a sport management major. And I always knew I wanted to do something with sports and with baseball. So I ended up adding Spanish as a major, and I spent some time in Ecuador learning how to navigate the language. But I got connected with Go as I was looking for a sport management internship. And my worlds kind of collided down here, seeing what ministry looks like, using my Spanish, my love for baseball, my love for sports, and it kind of all intersected here. I spent about 5.5 weeks here between my sophomore and junior year. And, I think for me, the big thing is using sports to impact other people and to give back. And just some cultural context here, kids in public schools they don't have access to sports teams. So we grew up middle school, high school, college, wherever you go, there are opportunities to play on sports teams. And usually it's especially at public schools, it's pretty much free of charge or very, very affordable. And there just aren't public sports down here. And so between some of the educational challenges and you look at some of the challenges with poverty and access to resources, there's not always a lot for young men and women to do. And so sports in general, I think, has a huge platform everywhere around the world. But when you talk about a country that is underdeveloped in some ways and doesn't have as many resources, you can really, really impact the next generation by simply having a basketball court or a baseball field or a soccer field. And so that's just kind of where my heart became drawn to what Go was doing and saying, hey, here's a soccer ball, here's a volleyball, a baseball bat, whatever it is, and you can really impact the next generation by using sports as a tool.
Coach, I would love for you to share, the kind of the thought process from the team's perspective, from the athlete's perspective, before they go on the trip, as you're getting prepared to go on the trip, and then subsequently as they're leaving the Dominican to come home, kind of that transition between what we thought it was going to be and what it actually was.
That's a great question, and I could talk forever on that subject. So when I was first approached by Jason Kennedy that he would like to do this for our program and our team and take us to the Dominican, I had a lot of fence sitters. I won't lie. We have a lot of guys here from East Tennessee that many of them have never left the state. For some of them, they don't. They've never gone out of the country. Some of them were on flights for the first time or the first time since they were kids and they don't remember. And going to another country kind of scared them a little bit. And as it got closer, I sensed more of the excitement coming on that we were doing something as a team. And I think that was important. And then, I won't go too much into it, but the journey on that day we left, January 5th, was a true journey. I mean, we were at the airport at 8:30 in the morning in Knoxville. Our flight took us to LaGuardia. obviously when you're traveling 35 people, cost is extreme. And so we went to LaGuardia, got off the plane, got our baggage, got onto a bus, a 40-man bus with 39 people in the party. So you imagine the luggage on that bus was in the hallways or in the aisleways. It was on laps, and we bused to JFK because we had a flight 7 hours later out of JFK heading to Santiago of the Dominican Republic. At 7:30, we board the Delta flight in at JFK. We're delayed like 2 hours. We're supposed to get in at 12:15 in the morning Dominican time. They're an hour ahead of us, East Coast time. So I knew it was going to be a long night already. Well, we don't land till 1:45. Have to go through customs. Jonathan and his crew is waiting for us at the airport. We get to Central, where we stayed at the church, at 3 in the morning. By the time everyone gets settled and all that, it's 4 in the morning. Jonathan goes over some rules with our guys, and I know my guys right now are saying, "Coach, you've lost your mind. What are we doing?" Okay, and I won't deny that I was kind of thinking that. I mean, if you want me to be truthful, I was thinking, boy, this is going to be a rough week. Then Jonathan stands up and goes over the rules of the of the week, and it's don't drink the water, which we knew. We were aware of that, and they supply all the water to keep our guys. And we had 39 people, Walter, on this trip, and not one person got sick. Okay, I want to emphasize that. Not one. Go Ministries does a fabulous job on keeping the cleanliness of how they wash their hands and everything before we eat, and we didn't get one guy sick. Then he goes through that the shower water is most of the time not hot, and it's going to be cold. And but to be honest with you, Walter, in the first couple days that you showered, you kind of like, whoa. But by the end of the week, it just becomes the norm, to be honest with you. It becomes the norm. And it just goes to show how resilient you can be if you just get a little tougher and not get used to being so comfortable. And then Jonathan goes over the rules of going to the restroom, and they don't have the sewer system that we have in the United States, and you can't flush toilet paper. So there was a lot of factors that went in, but I'm telling you, and Jonathan can vouch for this, by the next morning, which came really fast for our team, and we got to the facility to have a practice, and they saw the facilities and how beautiful they are there, and they got to see the daytime of traveling to the field from Central. The whole mindset of our team changed completely. And from that moment on, which was Monday afternoon, to that Saturday night when we were leaving, I can't tell you how many individuals came up to me or Jason Kennedy, maybe Jonathan too, and said, "Coach, this was the greatest experience of my life. I am so glad that we put this together." And Walter, as I said, as the head coach, you're kind of their mentor, you're like their father, whatever figure you are in their life. I couldn't have been prouder that I was part of that, to be able to impact so many people in that way. And again, there's so many stories. We put on youth camps, and to see Walter, as a baseball guy yourself, to see those kids. I mean, some of them don't even have good shoes on, that the arm strength in some of those kids, to see the bat swing, that the whip in their bats. It's amazing. It truly is amazing. I'll tell you a quick story, and I know I'm getting long-winded. So Tuesday is our first game, and Jonathan said, "We're not playing at the complex Tuesday. We're going to go play at an off-site." I said, perfect, perfect, because the complex was almost too nice for the Dominican Republic, to be honest with you. And I'm not putting the Dominican down. And we pull up to this facility, Walter, and it's like, I know our players' eyes popped out of their head. We're playing here? And I'm like, this is perfect. This is perfect. This is exactly what this team needs. Now, Walter, we go out there, and, just like we always do, we always scan the field and look at it. There's a hand mower out in the left center gap where the guy hadn't finished mowing the field yet. Now, I'm not talking mowing from an inch to a half inch. I'm talking from 3 inches to a half inch. Okay. He finished the job before first pitch. The bases were, Jonathan, you tell me if I'm wrong, the bases were pillows. Okay. Legitimate pillows. Okay. And the mound, when somebody told the people in the Dominican the mound is 60 feet 6 inches, they must have got it They must have got confused that they thought it was 66, because we measured the mound and it was 66 feet away. Okay, which
Wow.
again, all of it was perfect. Okay, Okay, deal with it, pitchers. Okay, maybe your fastball is not 86, maybe it's 83. Deal with it. Okay, because those players and those kids on the other side, that's a beautiful baseball field to them. And then the last thing I'll share is, and this is a exciting part for me and also a sad part for me. I look over down the right field line. We were in the third base dugout, and I see a bunch of young kids, anywhere from 8 years old to 12 years old. Okay, they're hitting into a tee, or they're hitting into a net off a tee, or front tossing. And I mean, I'm talking, Walter, I would have recruited every one of those guys right now to come play on our team. I mean, it was beautiful swings. They did some ground ball. You know, they're not hitting fungos, these kids. They're rolling balls, these kids. And their actions were phenomenal. And I said to Jonathan, I said, Jonathan, look at those guys. I said, I'd take those guys right now on my team. And he brought up a very powerful comment. He said, yes, you're right. But he says, see, Dave, what's sad is those guys are putting all their eggs into one basket. They're not going to school. They're not in school right now. They're they want to be a baseball player. And up until 16, they're gonna train. And if at 16 they don't get a chance, they have nothing left in their life. They have nothing to go to now. And it was sad. It was very sad. But to see the work ethic of those kids, I mean, it was 8:30 in the morning, I think it was. We were out there, and they're out there hitting into it. You know, it's not the greatest net in the world, but they're hitting, and I'm talking, they're hitting line drives, young kids just with bat speed, and it was amazing. And those are just the things that for me are so impactful that a week later I could sit and share, and I could tell you 900 stories that we encountered there on that trip that was just so eye opening and life changing to me.
You know, and Jonathan, I want to kind of capture that, that thought that coach has as he's sitting in a dugout, and the purpose from a ministry perspective, Go Ministries perspective, is to shed light on student athletes or people from other parts of the country to come into the Dominican, which is no different than many other countries within, the Latin, whether it's possibly Puerto Rico, whether it's Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Aruba, that we don't have all the luxuries, all across the world. We think we know what life is like in the Dominican, but when we actually are part of it and sitting in that environment, you begin to have a deeper appreciation. And that's what Go Ministries is all about, is to share not only the dream of baseball, but the betterment of life.
Yeah, and when you talk about for us as a faith-based organization, what the church is, we talk a lot about when you meet the needs that people have in your community, that's what it looks like to be the church. And so there's every country, every culture, every person has needs, whether it's a spiritual need, a physical need, an emotional need. Everybody has needs, and so our ministry is reaching people through different different forms. One of those is medical ministry, through church planting, and then also sports, which is what I'm focused on. But there's just something unique about, like Coach Serrano said down here, when you have 13 and 14-year-old kids who are not in school, and they call it their ticket out of poverty. If you can sign a contract at 16, and we talked about this when we visited the Pirates Academy down here, that age, they're probably not going to increase that age. It's going to be 16 for various reasons, but that's really young, and not everyone's mature at 16. Some of these guys that sign the money that they do, they're really grown men, but a lot of guys don't, reach puberty at 16. We know that. And so anyway, you have 13 and 14-year-olds, again, that they're not in school. Some of them aren't even with their families. They're offered money to move away and to train at other academies. And so you just miss out on a lot of what maybe that age should encompass. And then we want to help kids see that when they're 16, 17, 18, 19, and baseball's done for them, you've still got your entire life ahead of you. And so you see a guy like Juan Soto sign the contract that he did, and it's really exciting down here. If anything, it makes it even maybe tougher, because now everyone's like, I want to be the next Juan Soto. And I don't know the numbers specifically, but I bet 1 out of every 1,000 kids signs. It might be less than that. And so for all of the other kids, trying to shift the conversation to, hey, try to sign, that's great, but what happens if you don't? You've got to be able to work, provide for your family, and so we're just encouraging our kids to be in school And another thing that's we're kind of starting this year is vocational training, or helping kids learn just skills and trades to have. And so, yes, put everything that you have into trying to sign. That's great, but not at the expense of not being with your family and investing those relationships there. And then also your education. I think we maybe take for granted. You don't know if it's all you know, but the education system we have in the States. And so, I mean, when I first came down here in 2016, most kids were in school for 3 hours a day in public schools. And so there's only so much you can learn in a public school, and you may have class sizes of 30 to 40. So again, just trying to shift the conversation to what happens if you don't sign. Are you going to be able to have a job someday and skills that enable you to get paid well enough to where you can build a family and have some of those things in your back pocket?
Walter, I want to share this real quick.
Sure.
After hearing Jonathan say that, the school part is the main thing, but I had so many players in those 3 days that we had games down there say to me, or I ever heard them say in the dugout, when they have kids, they would love to send them down to the Dominican Republic for a summer to play baseball and learn how to play the game the right way and not be entitled and not have entitlement of the nice bats and the beautiful fields and all that, and just learn how to grind. And that was very powerful for me. And Walter, you cover this a lot on this show with the families, that we all look to the stars of what can happen, that big scholarship to the P4 school and all that stuff. But what is the process to making that happen? And that's, hearing our players say that was really strong for me, thinking they appreciated, look at these kids playing with passion, playing hard, and they don't have nearly what we have. And they just have a love for the sport. I heard Jonathan or Kyle say what is sad, and this was sad to me, that those players that put all their eggs into one basket down there in Dominican, when they're 25, 30 years old and their career is over, and people say, what do you do now? They continue to say, I'm a baseball player, because that's all they have. That's all they know. And that was to me very sad to hear that. And I could imagine them saying that, because that's all they do. They're a baseball player. They didn't make it in baseball, but they're a baseball player.
Well, I think both of you have collectively said something that both Coach and I preach a lot, is baseball is meant to, it's a baton that gets passed. It's simply generational, but you're using it, Jonathan, as a way of lifting people up to get them to understand not only the value of hard work, but to kind of see the life lessons that baseball teaches us throughout the youth and into your teenage years, and then how to use that as life skills beyond the diamond, and as well as providing for your family, a quality of life, and altering other people's lives. And so, Coach, maybe you and Jonathan can discuss how the boys in the Dominican, the younger players, lifted your athletes at Johnson up, and then conversely, how the boys in the Dominican were able to look at the athletes from Johnson and say, okay, maybe I should be going to college. Maybe I want to be a part of Johnson University.
I think that's a great message, Walter, a great question, because I saw that. I heard our players all say, I will feel guilty if I ever complain about anything ever again, because we think at times we have it bad. We don't have it bad. These other people and these other players are dealing with a lot more obstacles, and they just don't care. One of the things I walked away from on this trip was how resourceful the Dominican people are with such little. And I say that cautiously, because I'm not putting down that community by saying that, but I'm talking about, they're building a beautiful new complex at Go Ministries at their complex, that's going to house all the athletes that come in and do missionary work. It's beautiful, and it's right next to the baseball fields. And instead of steel beams holding up floor to floor, Walter, there was tree limbs that were holding up. And when we were laying cement, what we haven't talked about is how much our players grinded on clearing out a field to build a basketball court for a poverty-stricken neighborhood, that I felt. I've seen the renditions of it, and when this basketball court is laid, Walter, for these kids of this community, and when I say this community is, and I want to say it right, it's La Mina, La Mina,
La
La
Mina. Yeah.
Mina. I mean, Walter, it was sad when we drove in there. I mean, it's a dirt road. It's houses that, you wouldn't even consider houses in our communities. And our guys work their tails off to start the process of a basketball court that Go Ministries is putting up for these kids. And what kind of made me a little emotional is when the kids of the neighborhood that will get an impact, that will be impacted by this court, were coming and watching our players building, digging out, I mean, pulling out rocks and just doing everything they can to build this for this community. So yes, it impacted our players, but I think what I noticed is how it impacted the Dominicans. And I gave a speech one day after one of the games and told all the players that were there how important school was, and that one day you could come to the United States and be part of a program like this. And John, if you remember, they all started clapping after that. It was like it gave them hope that maybe if I do some things academically, I can. And there's been a few players that have continued to reach out to me through the WhatsApp, let me know, hey, coach, I was really impressed with your program. I'd love to come over to the States and play for you. And that's a connection Jonathan knows I would love to set up to bring kids over here and change their lives, and maybe change the way this program's going, because there's some really good players over there.
Yeah, that's awesome, and a really good question. If you think about the pressure that oftentimes kids in the U.S. face when they are growing up in youth sports, and some of that's put on them by their parents or whatever. But there's a lot of pressure there. But think about the pressure of if you don't sign with an MLB team by 16, that you may feel like you failed your family. Like you think of the pressure of that, or you don't feel like there's a future for your life. And so if we can give, and there's been a small culture shift. I think it would take a long time for an entire island to change and see what this would look like. But again, if you don't sign at 16, but then for the next 5 to 6 years, you have an opportunity to potentially go and play college baseball, that really changes things. And so Coach Serrano did bring everybody together and talk about the importance of education. But you asked how a trip like this benefits us. I mean, there's hundreds of baseball players that they interacted with throughout the week. If any one of those players says, you know what, I am going to stay in school, I'm going to get my degree, and let's say they work hard enough to learn English, if somebody goes and gets a scholarship to play college baseball in the U.S., I mean, that changes their life. Again, I don't want to underestimate, or take for granted our education system, but you get a college degree and you're bilingual, you come back, you can work at any company, any organization on the island. And the skills that you have, the doors it's going to open. Oliver is one of our head baseball guys at Go, and he was our first baseball player to go to the U.S. and play in college. He went to Iowa Central, I believe it is, community college, and then spent a couple years at Lindsey Wilson, an NAIA school in Kentucky. But now he comes back. He speaks English, and he can speak into the lives of every one of these young men. And that's, hey, it's okay to try and sign. If you don't sign, though, what we're talking about is you might have the chance to go play college baseball. And so, yeah, there were 3 or 4 kids I saw go up to Coach Serrano, and some had better English than others, but they're trying to learn the language. They're trying to stay in school. And so a trip like this for all these young men, it gives them perspective on your career, your life in some senses. Doesn't have to be over at 16. And obviously the college landscape has changed. It doesn't matter if you're 22 years old and you're a freshman. It just come play college baseball. And so I think this is the start of something really special for some of these guys down here.
Well, I've been saying for the last couple of years, both Coach and I have been talking about the interest that is starting to become bigger and bigger and bigger from the international student into the college baseball landscape. Spoke to a couple college coaches yesterday, and they were talking about Korea, Dominican, they were talking about Japan, and so the international student is making their way to the United States. But something, Jonathan, that I really want to kind of touch on, and I find this fascinating as the father of 2 sons, and faith is a very big part of our life, but yet we, as within the baseball community, have a tough time integrating or initiating that topic, because people kind of, we want to talk about baseball and more baseball. And if we talk about anything outside of that from an academic perspective, but faith is an integral part of the foundation of everybody's life in some capacity. And so I would love for you to discuss that as the foundational piece with regard to Go Ministries. It's a part of it, and that what you're trying to do is alter lives, not make better baseball players.
Yeah, 100%. And baseball or basketball or soccer, volleyball in our case, that's the connecting point. That's the tool that you use, the vehicle per se. But yeah, faith organization. We want every one of the young men and women, and we have 1,200 kids almost between the ages of 8 and 18 that are at our facility each week, and that's not including the other sites where we have churches, like in La Mina, where we were building a basketball court with Johnson. So you talk about the impact that court is going to make. There's going to be hundreds of kids that come to that court someday. But we want every one of the young men and women to know that God loves them. God has created them with a purpose for their lives. And so if that can be more than baseball, to help them see that there is a special purpose in their life, and irregardless of where someone is at in their life when it comes to faith, I think when you're a part of something that's bigger than yourself, and you believe in giving back to other people and loving your neighbor and just being selfless, that's a really powerful thing. And that's something most people take away from their time here. I mean, there are people that we'll interact with throughout the week that have nothing, and they would still give you everything that they have. And I've got countless stories of that. But people who they're so generous, they're so outgoing, they're always thinking about other people before themselves. And I think that's a really powerful way to live, and you can really make an impact in other people's lives when you live that way.
Coach, I want to finish with you because I know that this trip had a deeper meaning than just the training perspective of baseball. And you've been around this now for many decades. And I want you to just simply share with those that maybe aren't quite at that college level yet, but that those college years, you're really giving each and every athlete that you have the opportunity to coach an experience that will alter their future, keep things in perspective, to gain insight into, or better said, clarity into the bigger picture that the world is all about once they leave college from a baseball perspective. Kind of share on that as you guys were coming home and you were about to land back in Knoxville. How the team felt, and more importantly, how you as a staff felt with regard to your trip.
Well, you've talked about this a lot, Walter, especially recently about being transactional and being transformational. Um, and I think a lot of my career, especially when I was at places that were expected to win, I was transactional, and I knew I was making impact on kids by the discipline factors I was holding them to, and all that was impacting them in their life somehow. But I realize now why I'm coaching at Johnson University. I want to build a program. I want to make it successful. I want to make it better than it was when I got here. But this trip proved to me that it isn't about wins anymore for me. It isn't about fame, and I've known that for a long time. It's about what I could do to impact some players. Um, and it may not even be today. It may not even be this week. But I know that there's 35 members of our organization that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they'll think about those wheelbarrow races that our players were having with those kids and seeing the smiles on their faces. They'll think about the wheelbarrows full of cement that they were pouring for the basketball court. They'll think about the weeds they were picking. They'll think about the trees they were knocking down um, to clear the space. They'll think about the camp. They'll think about everything of that trip. There's no doubt, Walter, because it was a trip of being comfortable, being uncomfortable for 7 days. Okay, the sleeping quarters of the showers and all that. None of it was bad. None of it was bad. I came back tougher. Okay, I thought I was tough. I wasn't as tough as I thought after having to go through that. But it just changed everyone's life. And I want to say this again. This isn't a promotional commercial, but this is, coaches, if you're listening to this and you have the resources to take your team, you're going to be guaranteed great weather, especially schools that are in the Northeast or in the North. Yeah, I know it doesn't count even for Division I. You could take an international trip and you can go outside the window of your practice time. I highly recommend it more than just the baseball part. And I admitted early on, I was excited for the baseball part because I knew we haven't been on our field yet because of snow and cold weather. We were on the field for a week in the Dominican, but that was selfish on my part. And as I came back, I realized how selfish can I be? It really wasn't even about the baseball. And Walter, we talked about this, and we didn't. You can upload. You could put up that video and show all your listeners that you don't have to do it now, but you could put it on your site. Tyler Rojas, one of our players, did a fabulous job of making a
Fabulous
video,
job.
and his dad was the voiceover explaining what the trip was. Victor Rojas, the announcer, now NAI coach. And what I loved about that video, and I didn't see it until he was done, but what I loved about how his approach to that video was, is you would think when a student athlete makes that, it'd all be about the highlights. Cade Leafer hitting a grand slam for us to leave to win the game, all the stuff that happened athletically. But it was very little about the athletic part, and it was more about the journey and the mission of what we accomplished when we were there and what we took in as we were there. And I know you're showing it right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things, and I want folks to know, coaches, athletes, parents, and I'm going to let Jonathan share the contact information. We're going to have all of that in the description as far as Go Ministries is concerned, how you can reach out to them, how you could schedule a trip if you were so inclined to do so. But Jonathan, if you could just share, how do people get in touch with Go Ministries or yourself directly with regard to potentially planning a trip?
Yeah, so part of what I do is just coordinate a week with a team like Johnson, and so I have my email, my phone number, and happy to set up a video call or a phone call, or we can exchange messages. But yeah, just being able to be a part of this experience again it's beneficial for us. You're doing service projects together, but you can play games, you can put on baseball camps, go spend an afternoon on the ocean at the beach. You can sit with some of our athletes in English class and inspire them to stick with it and talk about the importance of education, but just taking in that, the cultural aspect and bonding as a team together. Again, I'm not trying to just sell it because we're down here. I truly believe it would be, as you said, a transformational experience for both sides. And so, yeah, I would love to set up a time to talk with any coach that wants to know more.
And so, parents,
let me add
go
this,
ahead.
Walter. I know as coaches out there, I know I was the same. You want to go back and say, hey, I taught this guy how to throw that nasty slider. I was able to teach that guy how to have good hands and quick hands on the double play. Boy, I really taught that guy how to have good launch angle. But at the end of the day, if you're able to impact your players on what we taught our players of seeing another culture and what they go through every day and how it impacted us, I don't think as a coach you'll have anything that'll surpass that. And I know that. Like I said, we could be successful this year as a team, and I'll remember January 5th through January 12th, and the impact that had on our team will be nothing great. Nothing will be greater than that, no matter how many games we win and how successful we are.
And I'm going to have make sure Jonathan Henschel's information and Go Ministries information is down below. These are the types of trips that when your student athletes are older, they'll always remember the premise of giving back and providing for those that may not have the same luxuries that we take for granted here on a day-to-day basis. But Coach and Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Really looking forward to spreading this word. And obviously, Coach, this will be part of our message going forward.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, guys.